listening to the best of the Martha Zoller Show. To hear the full show each day, tune in to AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN or log in to accesswdun.com and click the Listen Live button from 9 to 11, Monday through Friday. It is the Martha Zoller Show, and joining me right now to talk about AmFest is Emory Roy. And Emory's been on the show a few times with us, and she's just back from Phoenix. Emory, how are you, and Merry Christmas.
Good morning, Martha. Thank you so much, and Merry Christmas. Wow, what a conference that we just had out there in Phoenix, Arizona.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about this. First of all, how many times have you been before, and then what was this year like?
So this is about my third time attending AmFest, second time as staff, and I will say everybody knows in the conservative grassroots movement, this is the biggest event that the conservative movement puts on. It's a 4-day event where we have amazing speakers that come. We have worship service. We have breakout sessions between Turning Point USA and Turning Point Action, and it is just a way where everybody can come get involved, and they'll learn a way to get involved with Turning Point when they go there if they have not already. And it is just an amazing time. And usually we hit about the 10,000, 15,000 mark every year. We always have enough tickets sold. People can decide last minute if they want to fly into Phoenix and come to our conference. But this year that was not the case. We actually had to have a wait list. And by that opening day, Martha, the line was out the door. And as many people as we were fitting into the exhibit hall, they were letting in. And it was a sight that, we know Charlie was looking up from above, but that he was looking at and going, this is what I always wanted, right? This is what he always wanted, was to be able to fill out arenas of conservative grassroots people and to get them involved and to get them plugged in, because he understood, the conservative movement, we have to have a permanent infrastructure that lasts past Donald Trump, that lasts, past every election cycle. And so honestly, this is what we've always dreamt of as an organization. It's unfortunate that the biggest one that we had, Charlie was not here to be with us, and this happened to be the first one that he was not there.
Yeah, and when I went to the Young Women's Leadership Summit in June, which was my first Turning Point event, because I'm not exactly your demographic, right? I'm 66 years old, and I've been involved in the movement for a long time. I'm more of a CPAC person, okay? And I want to talk about that in a minute. But I loved it. And one of the things I loved about the Women's Forum, the Young Women's Leadership Forum, was that there was moms and daughters there, and there was a lot of family involvement. Is that the same way with AmFest, or is it more of a college, young adult kind of theme? Yeah. It is the same. It is the same concept. I tell people, we ought to drop the young women from the title and just say Women's Leadership Summit, because it really is for all women. And the same thing with AmFest. You had adults going without kids, you had parents going with their kids, because I think people often forget, Turning Point Action, the political side of our organization, that is not age restricted. That is open to everybody. And instead of chapters, we have those things called coalitions that I mentioned on your show, Martha, back in June. So we've got like the Moms Coalition, the Healthy Americans Coalition, which is the offset of the MAHA movement. One of the things that Turning Point has been great at is putting a permanent stake in the ground in the conservative movement for these groups, such as MAHA and Moms, and saying, y'all have a permanent seat at this table, and we actually need your demographic in order to win elections moving forward. And that's just the honest truth, Martha. Why would we have a coalition for one election cycle when we agree on about, 70-80% of the stuff, especially MAHA, and not invite them at the table for the upcoming cycles? Same with all these demographics. So that's the importance of Turning Point Action, is we're here as, a coalition building, operation for Get Out the Vote, but we're also here to have a seat permanently at the table for these groups that, were either disenfranchised by the Democrats or for the longest time didn't feel like there was a home in the conservative movement. So obviously you followed the news media while the event was going on, and there was a lot of focus on kind of the he said, she said that was going on the stage. In the audience with the people, what was the reaction to that? And I'm not going to name names or call things out because I don't think it's productive. But but the news coverage was a lot about some of the speeches and what people were saying about each other. Your thoughts on that, and what did you see on the ground?
Well, on the ground, you saw obviously supporters on both sides of what was being said, but ultimately you had a lot of younger people that, they looked at it and they kind of questioned it because they remember Charlie was an individual who, if there was a disagreement, just like at our Student Action Summit back in July, the last one he attended, he had a debate between, on a big worldview topic. Right. And so that's kind of how he is. It's, those speakers were talking past each other on stage, and Charlie would have never wanted that. He would have wanted them to sit down and, have an open dialogue. Somewhere down the line, there's some type of agreement along the way, but we're not getting there, and we're actually hurting ourselves as a movement the more we're dividing ourselves. And I think, it's been more prevalent since, Charlie's been gone. We've been seeing that kind of amongst the conservative movement, a lot of infighting and division. And so I think a lot of people are picking up on that, and they're wanting to find a leader like the J.D. Vance or somebody else where we're saying, we're not going to divide because everybody has a seat at the table in this party.
I got to tell you, I listened to all of those controversial speeches, and I resonated the most with Ben Shapiro. I'm not asking anybody to pick sides, but I think Ben is one of the most thoughtful people in the movement. He's also a person that knows how to say difficult things, but he doesn't seem to bear grudges. He'll say the thing, and then he wants people to think about it. And while he's not as smooth as Charlie was, Charlie, Ben has always been a type AAA, kind of. I mean, I've known him since he was a kid many years ago, and he's always been that kind of hard-charging, fast-talking kind of person. And Charlie, over the years, because I met Charlie, in 2012 when I was going out of radio to run for office, and it was either at the Breakers or it was at the RNC that year. I honestly can't remember because I was kind of in a different place in my life. I met him briefly, didn't really spend any time talking to him, did watch him closely. And, the Charlie Kirk of 12 years ago was not as smooth as the Charlie Kirk was a year ago. You know what I mean? Absolutely. He learned as time went on how to approach these issues and how to build these coalitions. And I think the greatest legacy of Charlie Kirk is if you will actually take the time and look at young Charlie, well, all the Charlie Kirks are young, but you know what I mean, like early 20s versus 30. He adapted, he changed, he grew. Yes. He learned, and he had this way about him of not making, really not making people mad. Yeah, there's always going to be pundits that are going to be mad about everything, but I'm talking about the people that were a part of Turning Point or were thinking about Turning Point.
Right. And he had this unique ability, like I said, to coalition build. I mean, he brought RFK and Trump to the table. He has times, in the past in the conservative movement, stopped infighting amongst some conservative influencers, like you said. So, when you lose a presence like that in our movement, especially just outside of politics, somebody as bright and articulate and, as authentic as Charlie was, I mean, it's just a loss to all of us. I think a lot of people forget, Turning Point is still grieving as a whole. Like, we did have a phenomenal conference and we loved it, but, it was really hard without our founder there. Somebody, you see kind of walking around the conference that are making sure everything's, okay before we actually open the doors. And, all the way to ensuring it's successful at the end.
And I've had a lot of loss in the last few weeks personally. And I did a tweet today and sent it around to my small group too, where I said, I'm thinking about the people who are going through their first Christmas without somebody that they loved. And also about the people that didn't know that last Christmas was going to be their last Christmas with those people they loved. Because it's important that as we go into a holiday like this, whether you are Turning Point Action or you're involved at your church or you're doing, just a workaday life, to think about that kind of thing. And it hit me this morning, that not only is it difficult for people who like Turning Point, Erica Kirk from a family situation, Charlie's children, they're going to go through their first Christmas without Charlie. but also they didn't know that last Christmas was going to be their last Christmas with him.
Yes, ma'am. Exactly.
And you have to be aware of that. And I think that's where some of this understanding will come from. There's a young man that I know that used to be a Democratic operative, and he started struggling with his the kind of language that was being used in the liberal movement. He still considers himself a Democrat, but he's a pastor. And he said he doesn't think some of the things that they talk about line up with what he believes is what God wants him to do. And so he's not in politics anymore. He's a pastor full time now, and he started this thing called the AND campaign, which is basically saying how we should have these kind of conversations. And I'm looking for that kind of leadership, and the world now with the loss of Charlie Kirk is looking for that kind of leadership.
I agree, man. I agree. 110% people are. They're looking for that person.
Absolutely. So what's next for you? What have you got lined up in the next few months?
So the next few months we've got, we're going to be organizing our coalitions across the state of Georgia. We're going to be trying to get out the vote efforts ready for, this 2026 cycle. It is such an important cycle that I don't even think people understand the significance that Georgia has in this 2026 midterm. We not only have the Senate race, but we have every single down ballot race. And I know Martha, the Democrats have come chomping at the bone this 2025 cycle. We saw them flip a House district up there outside of Athens, an R+10 district that the Democrats got. We saw the PSC race. We saw them flip the city of Roswell. And so, here at Turning Point, we can't be complacent. This is the exact thing that Turning Point Action is here to be built. It's that permanent infrastructure, and it's to get people ready to go. Starting in 2026, we cannot wait until the springtime because the Democrats, as you know, there's no off season for them. I mean, they quite literally started the PSC races the night Trump won in 2024.
No, you're absolutely right. Emory Roy, if people want more information, how can they get it?
You can go and see us on social media at tpaction.com. You can see me on Twitter at the Emory Roy, and you can also get involved with Turning Point Action at tpaction.com/get involved.
We'll talk again soon, and I hope you have a Merry Christmas.
Thank you, thank you, Martha. You too, and have a Merry Christmas.
It's where North Georgia comes to talk. It's the Martha Zoller Show on AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN.
My good friend Frank Morano is joining me right now. For many years, he hosted a radio show overnights on WABC, and we've participated on panels together. And a year or so ago, he ran for city council and is on the New York City Council. And I just put two and two together, Frank, that you are going to be dealing with Zohran Mamdani. How are you doing?
Well, good morning, Martha. First of all, thank you so much for having me on. As you know, radio is something I'm very passionate about, and I've always appreciated our conversations, especially when you're willing to stay up late to come on my program. And whenever I get an opportunity to scratch that itch, I'm appreciative of the opportunity to do so. But hey, no one knows what's going to happen a week from tomorrow. That seems to be the question that's on everybody's mind. A lot of New Yorkers, especially a lot of right-of-center New Yorkers, are nervous. A lot of people are concerned, but we're all waiting, watching, and wondering. And unfortunately, some of the moves that the mayor-elect has made on his transition team, including the appointment of a couple of people like the people that you were just playing news clips of, have only added to the consternation that a lot of us have. I mean, it would be one thing if you were only dealing with his ideology. He is the most extreme left-wing mayor of all time. Now, again, you're never going to get an ultra-conservative as mayor of New York City. That's just not the way New York City's politics are. But to have someone that's this extreme of a left-winger is uncharted territory. Then you take into account that he's also the youngest and the least experienced mayor that we've had in over 100 years. That's uncharted territory. And then finally, the fact that all of the rhetoric rhetoric that he and so many of his team seem to propagate involve the hatred or the dislike of Jews and Israel, it all fits into a very troubling pattern. That being said, I'm willing to try and give him the benefit of the doubt. He's made a couple of good moves, including his decision to keep the current police commissioner, who I think is doing a very good job. We'll see where it all goes, but a lot of my constituents are very nervous.
So explain to people how the New York City Council works, because it looks like it's a pretty big body, and where do you represent?
So, yeah, it's a great question. There are 51 of us. I think in terms of municipal legislatures, we're probably the largest in the country, but New York's a large city. You're representing about 8.5 million people. So there are 51 of us. I represent a portion of Staten Island. Each borough, it's by district, each borough elects a bunch of different folks. Staten Island has 3 folks that go. I represent a very conservative area. Out of 51 members of the city council, there are currently 6 Republicans. So you have an idea, and I'm one of the 6, and you have an idea of the kind of battle that we tend to do each and every time we step into the city council chambers. That's not to say we can't find common ground with people on the other side of the aisle, because ultimately a lot of them want fires put out, they want clean streets, they want the garbage picked up, and so on. But a lot of times they are just putting forward bills that are seemingly not even from another borough or another party. Seems like they're from another planet.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting because our state Senate is 56 members. So that's roughly, your city council's roughly the size of our state Senate. And I remember the days when we only had 2 Republicans. We had 2 Republicans, and it was Johnny Isakson and Paul Coverdale, and they had to learn the lesson very quickly that if they wanted to get anything done, they had to be willing to not have their name on it. They would go to their Democratic colleagues when it was that way, and Democrats have to do that now with Georgia. If they really want to get something done, they have to come and get other people to buy into it because they're in a minority. But it's very interesting, and I love New York, Frank. I was there with my daughter. We come once a year. I'm planning on bringing my grandchildren not this Thanksgiving, but next Thanksgiving. We're going to go to the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. It's on my bucket list. I'm planning this trip. I love the city. My dad grew up in Jersey City, but he worked on Wall Street for a period of time. So I have great connections, and no one's going to kill New York. Okay, no one's going to kill New York, but, it's going to be a little bit like Mayor Lindsay. Even though Mayor Lindsay was a nice-looking guy, he ran New York into the ground, and you're going to have some problems there for a while.
Yeah, first of all, Martha, I'm very impressed at your knowledge of New York City history. There's not a lot of hosts I talk to around the country that can go back 54 years and not only know who the mayor was back in 1969, but actually be able to point to his strengths and weaknesses, which in the case of Lindsay, as you rightly pointed out, was his good looks as a strength and his inability to pick up the snow as a weakness. But by the way, you also have to let me know when you're in New York. I'd love to take you and your family on a tour of City Hall, and I think they'd get a big kick out of it. The New York City Council chambers and City Hall, where I work, is the oldest continuously operating government building in the country, I believe. I think we've been functioning as a place where a legislative body meets since, I believe, the early 1820s. But I think your point is exactly right. One, in the fact that New York's going to survive irrespective of who the elected leadership is, but also the fact that, we need to do what we can to make sure that the things that a mayor does, arrest bad guys, put out fires, pick up trash, that doesn't take a back seat to pursuing this ideology of democratic socialism, which I think a lot of people are concerned about. And it's funny, you talked about the corollary with Georgia politics, and it's funny, I just had lunch last week with Chip Rogers, who you no doubt and a lot of your listeners will remember was the former majority leader. And he was talking about how politics in Georgia changed when he was in elective office. And I think we're seeing a similar change in New York within the Democratic Party. It used to be, New York was always a Democratic city, even though we elected Republican mayors and governors from time to time. But it used to be that the mainstream of the Democratic Party and the leadership of the Democratic Party was kind of pro-labor, pro-Israel, pro-maintaining institutions. Now, the dominant electoral force within the Democratic Party in New York City is the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America. And you really have, for the most part, two types of Democratic elected officials in New York City. You have the DSA types, and then you have those that are afraid of the DSA types in a Democratic primary, and so they do whatever they can to placate the DSA types. And that's why a lot of us are so concerned and so nervous about what may be happening in the new year. I mean, we have a speaker of the city council who is more of a moderate Democrat, so I'm hoping that she'll be able to provide at least a little bit of a check on the Mamdani agenda. We'll see.
I think Mamdani has shown that he will bend. I mean, he got rid of this person with her obviously anti-Semitic thing, and when he went and met with the president, he was, I mean, I didn't even recognize that guy. I mean, and the president was funny, and he disarmed him. I think he went in there expecting a fight with him, and he was surprised with how charming Donald Trump can be.
Yeah, you know, having spent a fair amount of time with President Trump before he was president, I can tell you firsthand how charming Trump is. And you're the first person that I'm about to say this publicly to. But last Friday, I spent an hour with Mayor-elect Mamdani, and you could understand why Trump was so charmed by him. We spent an hour together. He asked a lot of the right questions. He seemed genuinely curious about Staten Island and about my community, and didn't seem interested in trying to persuade me on things that we were obviously not going to be in agreement on. So if that's going to be his attitude when he deals with President Trump or the Republican members of the city council, then I think he's going to have a lot of success. But if it's going to be trying to pursue, this kind of Bernie Sanders AOC style agenda as mayor, then I think it's going to be a very, very difficult 4 years for him.
So, Frank, we will check in with you again. And, yeah, next time I'm in New York, I'll give you a call.
You absolutely must, and whenever you're hard up for guests or want some perspective on New York, give me a call. I always love chatting with you on the air or off.
That's great, Frank. Merry Christmas.
You too, Martha. Thanks for having me. Have a good Christmas, holiday, New Year, all the rest.
To hear the full versions of last week's Martha Zoller shows, go to the podcast page at accesswdun.com, and you can follow me on social media at Martha Zoller.